Hello, welcome to our 10-part workshop series called Everything Aurora. We are here in March 2021 amidst a global pandemic, and we hope to share with you some inspiration for living lightly on our beautiful planet Earth. Culture. So this is the most important part of the beginnings of cheeses, and it really goes back to kind of antiquity in terms of natural bacteria's commingling, coming from the bacteria from the milk and curdling to make the curds and whey. So that is just a very, very brief of a long and very interesting history of cheese making. And so what I had offered to some of you who came and picked it up was a little jar of what's called kefir. So kefir, you may have seen it in the stores, or you may have tasted it yourself. Maybe you enjoy it regularly. This can be made in your home very easily by maintaining a kefir culture. So they call it kefir grains. It's not actually a grain. It has nothing to do with grains. It just sort of looks like a grain, but it's actually a SCOBY. So a SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. That's the acronym for SCOBY. And so what it does is it puts all this great bacteria and yeast into this milk and draws out and brings alive all of the natural bacterias that are already in this milk just from coming out of the raw milk out of our goats. So what we're going to do, if those of you who had the culture, you might have already seen it, but when you lift it up, it kind of looks like a jellied light yogurt. Okay, so that's the sign that has sat out on my counter for 2 days. And for those of you who picked it up, that's why I told you have to leave it out for longer. In the winter, it seems to take quite a bit longer. It takes about 2 days to really form that nice, thick, gelatinous culture. So that is. Pardon me?
I might have told people one day.
Oh, yeah, Aynsleigh was just mentioning, it can be 1 or 2 days. It really depends on what's happening in your environment and the cold factor that we're in right now in Manitoba at very deep freeze. So what we're going to do is we're just going to strain that out. So for those of you who are at home that had this culture, I want you to strain it out. So I'm just spooning it into a little sieve and just a little mesh, and just kind of spooning it to get all of that to come out. And what you're going to be left with at the end, if you were to rinse it off, is the actual little bacterial culture itself. Can you turn your lights on? Whoops. So the SCOBY itself is like this little jellied kind of combination of, like, I don't know what it looks like, but a whole bunch of little balls put together. That is what a kefir grain is going to look like. So that's what you're looking for in your culture. And that is what you're going to use to create the next culture. So this is a process like sourdough where you're going to keep this alive over time, and you're going to just keep feeding it more raw milk to be able to keep it alive. You can use, of course, pasteurized milk too, and you can use the kefir like as you would yogurt in your baking or in your cereal or however you like to use it, or just to drink plain. So that kefir is going to be the starter culture of all of our cheeses today. And there's just one cheese that we will, 1 or 2 cheeses that we won't use this on. But this is, if you can maintain this, a culture like this, then you will have it to make cheese indefinitely. And that just keeps growing. So where I have I'm just showing you a couple of little kefir grains right now. After a few cycles, it will be 4 and then more and more. So I maintain a large jar of mother kefir, just full of kefir grains like that, so that I have them to share with people, and also so that in case I had any problems, I would always have more backup. So they can live in the fridge for up to 2 weeks without doing anything to them. So if you only want to make cheese every once in a while, you can maintain that kefir culture in your fridge over a period of time. Or if you're in the process if you have your own dairy animals and you want to be in the process of making whatever you want, you can start yogurt with this, you can start any of your cheeses with this, or you can, like I said, just drink it as kefir. So it's really a wonderful thing to be able to keep and maintain your kefir culture. If anybody goes away from this workshop who does not have their own kefir culture or didn't get one from me, I have a lot and I'm always happy to share it. And really, it's the only way you can get it. It's not really something that you can order. It's something that you have to find from somebody else. So it has this, long standing, very neighborly, communitarian way about it, where that culture was something that people did not take for granted. And, if theirs died, they knew their neighbors would have some, and the neighbors would give it freely because they knew that maybe someday theirs would die. So it's just, to me, carrying on that tradition is really important. And one of the reasons why I keep a lot of kefir. And people who know me, who make cheese, sometimes call me up and say, I killed my batch of kefir. Can I come and get some? And so that's why it's nice to be the person who has the kefir. So if you feel like being a kefir caretaker, then that's a good job for you as well. Okay, so with that kefir, I'm going to start my first cheese, and this is this morning's milk. Not quite the one that you saw Aynsleigh do, but that's about how much we get. So in that pail that came from this morning, I just kept it a little bit warm so that it would keep that temperature. So when milk comes in from the udder of an animal, it is a temperature that's body temperature, right? So when you touch it, it feels like the same temperature as our body because they have roughly the same temperature as we do. So that is the temperature to start your cheese. Now, of course, if it came from the barn into the house on a minus 32 day, you're going to have to warm it up just a little bit. And if you are using store-bought milk, then you have to warm it up to that baby bottle temperature, like just that, warm body temperature that you would want before you start it. Okay. So with that, we're going to start our first cheese, which is Chèvre, which, if any of you are French, Chèvre just means goat, but it is the premium and long standing cheese of France, peasant cheese of France. And it has come to be a delicacy here in North America because it's very hard to maintain. It's a fresh cheese. And so unlike some of the other cheeses that, can have preservatives or just are aged, so they have a longer shelf life, Chèvre cheese does not have a long shelf life. So it's something that you will need to make regularly. But once you get making it regularly, you will want to make it regularly. So now, question is, can you make it with cow's milk? Well, yes. And we're still going to call it Chèvre because it's Chèvre style. But it really traditionally should be goat's milk. So this is what I have. And it is really the cheese that I've made so often. It's just such a staple to my diet and to my family that, it's something that we could... Oh, that's a good question. Can I ship the starter culture to North Dakota? I would love to. Let's figure it out. Hey, we can only try, right? Yeah, that would be great. So that's okay. And then there's another one from Louise. Yes, absolutely. You can use the Mesophilic. So as I said in my note that I sent around, you can use a Mesophilic culture starter. So that comes in a package. Well, normally this is the kind of package it comes in. Okay. And that usually comes with about 5 little mini packets. And that can be, let's say, anywhere from, I don't know, $8 to $10 for 5 little packets. So it gets to be more and more expensive. Plus, because this is mass produced, it's a freeze-dried version of basically this, except that the way they produce it is much simpler, whereas this would have, thousands of different bacteria and yeast and just a very complex culture. What they do to create these freeze-dried ones are just much simplifying that. So it is not as robust a cheese, it's not as good a cheese, and it also, costs a lot more. So if part of this effort is to, economize and be able to have better cheese and more cheese without spending more money, then keep maintaining your own kefir starter is really important. Okay, so that's just my pep talk on kefir, and some people love it, and it's great for right now with everything going on. It's such a great immune system booster, and gives your such a good microbe to your microbe diversity to your innards, that it's really a premium health food for us right now. So I'm going to take that kefir that I just strained out. So I don't really want those kefir grains in it. I just want the kefir itself, and it's a ratio of 1 to 50. So whatever the amount of milk that you're starting with, you want 1 to 50. You want a 1 to 50 ratio of kefir. So for a 4-liter batch, it's going to be about 20 milliliters. But for me, I know and can kind of tell, I'll gauge how much it is. So this is maybe about 2 teaspoons that's going into this, and that's good. And then I'm going to take a couple of drops of this rennet. So we also talked about rennet, which is an enzyme. This one, as you can see, is a vegetable rennet, and there's a whole long workshop around rennet, but I'm going to just say that it's a complex decision what kind of rennet you use, but this is the choice that I have made for my own reasons to use the vegetable rennet. So there are animal-based rennets, which is the lining of a baby calf, and who's been harvested simply for that. And there are arguments to using those. That is the traditional method. And there are now a few more truly vegetable, like thistle and stinging nettle. There are some other ones that are starting to gain more popularity as we understand them better of how to use them. So this is a produced enzyme, and it is a vegetable derived. So anyway, with that said, this is the coagulating agent. This is what turns it to curds and whey. So I am going to put literally just 2 drops, 2 drops into this pot, and I'm going to stir that all up. And then now we're going to fast forward and pretend we've sat around for 24 hours, or between 8 and 24 hours. But in this case, when the house is chillier, it's going to take a bit longer. And what we have, we're going to just set it out on the table. We're not going to warm it or heat it or touch it or anything. We're just going to put a little lid on it. And what you have is one curdled mass. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'm going to show you. And you can see there's kind of like a sloshy, liquidy whey. And I'm going to show that a little bit better by now setting up for my, I'm going to use this kind of a strainer to put this through, and I'm going to sit it in a sieve, and I'm going to sit that in a milk bucket. Okay, so I'm going to set that all like that, and I'm going to use a slotted spoon. Now, and really, the recipe books say use a slotted spoon, and there's a reason why. Is because then you can scoop it out, and that liquidy whey comes out. And when you're scooping, this is the fun part, which you cannot do with me, but when you're scooping, you're getting these nice big chunks of, and what you want to do is kind of try to gently put them in and try to gently get as big of chunks as you can out, so that you maintain that nice texture that is the Chèvre cheese. And if you're a Chèvre cheese lover, you know that when you cut into a piece of Chèvre, it has that nice kind of very fine texture where you can see all of those little lines of cheese, of the structure of the cheese. And so we're just going to keep putting all of that into this, and I'm not sure if you can hear it, but there's a nice little drizzly sound that's coming through. And so that's the whey is coming out of there. Oops. There's a method where they do it in big vats, and they take this mold and they simply put the whole mold in and pull out, and that's a traditional way called à la louche, which really completely preserves the structural integrity of that cheese. But as you can see, it's coming out pretty much still in big chunks. And I'm going to get the whole amount in there. And that I'm going to leave on the counter again because it's going to continue its work of fermenting. So this is a fermentation because that kefir starter that we put in there is a culture that is fermenting this whole thing. And now I'm just going to pour the rest of that whey through, just so we get all of those last little pieces. There are no big pieces left. And that's going to sit on my counter for possibly up to another 24 hours. So there will be an opportunity to look at it again kind of at the very end of this workshop and see, because it will have, the whey will have all drained down, and then we'll have more or less what we're going to see tomorrow. It's going to just continue to drain out and dry to the point where we'll be able to turn it over and bang it out. Okay, so that's our first little move for the day. That's our first cheese. Now, as I said, normally in my workshops, this is as a cheese and cracker. We make a couple of crackers, we make a couple of cheeses, and then we eat the cheese with the crackers. I'm just, for the sake of brevity in this workshop, I'm going to just give you a quick little pep talk on the cracker situation. And we're posting in the notes a couple of different recipes that we like. And so my very fast pep talk is that when I'm making my crackers, I really love having this little grinder. If you want to do one thing to boost your health and get a little grinder like that, what you can do is grind up all kinds of things. So here I've got French green lentils, flax, and some buckwheat from the grain. I've got those all freshly ground. And so those are going to go into my crackers. So that suddenly makes crackers a health food. Okay. So we've got that. I've also kind of strained out, I took some herbs from the garden from last year. I've got some basil and thyme and oregano and dill in here. And I've kind of made them nice and fine. And then I'm going to put those in there. And then I'm going to use about, I say always put at least a third of a cup. Unless you want a very dense cracker, you can use all whole wheat. I like a little bit lighter, so I'm putting in about a half a cup of all-purpose flour. Generally, we're used to crackers having salt. If you don't want salt, you do not need salt. And then, of course, you need some kind of oil in there. So I'm just going to mix that up and put in, if for those of us in Winnipeg, if you know Frescolio, I'm just going to do a little shameless plug for them because I love their stuff. They're oil and balsamic makers, olive oil. And this is a lime olive oil. So I'm just going to put a little swig so we have a little taste of lime. And then I'm going to use our whey. So this is the whey that came off the mozzarella that I'm just making in the background here earlier today. And as you can see, you get a lot of whey. It looks whiter than it is from what I'm seeing back to me. It has sort of a greenish translucent look to it. And it is not to be thrown out, okay? Whey is also a superfood. If you've ever known or been a bodybuilder, you know that whey powder is the thing that we use to build our muscles up. And whey, you can use your whey for all kinds of things. So as a soup base, as a bread or a biscuit or any kind of cake, you know, any liquid that you would be using, either water or milk, you can use the whey. So do not discard it, even freeze it if you have to. If you sometimes get overflowing with whey, you can also feed it to your chickens, if you have chickens, if you're lucky enough to, or you can feed it to your tomatoes, you know, heavy feeders like that in the gardens, okay? Or if you're a flower farmer, you could feed it to your flowers. We have a flower gardener in our group today. So I'm not measuring this. I'm just going to pour my whey in to where I think it's going to be, just to get that nice, you know, biscuity that you can roll out. And while we're going to, and I'll roll that out and cut it while Aynsleigh plays for you. Our next cheese highlight for today is feta cheese. So I'm going to start by pouring in some kefir. And just, you can see how nice and thick that is. And I'm going to just get that all mixed around. And this is goat's milk, okay? Because traditionally, of course, the feta cheese is always with goat's milk. So we're going to just, or sheep. So we're going to mix that in. And then next, we're going to take some rennet and we're going to dilute in, this is a 4-liter batch. So we're going to take about a 1/4 teaspoon, dilute it in about a 1/2 cup of water. And we're going to slowly pour and stir that all over and make sure this is all going up and down. Movements as you're pouring it in to make sure it gets all the way through. And then we are going to leave that like that until step 2. Okay, we're going to do a little test. It's been 1 hour that we've had the rennet and the kefir into our feta. So we're going to test for what's called a clean break. You can do it with your fingers or you can do it with a knife. And as you can see, that feta pulls away nicely as I cut into it. Makes a nice clean break. And that is the clean break test. So now we're going to cut it. So this is the next day when the feta has sat overnight and strained out, and you can see it's nicely in its mold. So I'm going to turn it over and give it a good solid bam, and out it comes beautifully. So now I'm going to take a knife, a sharp knife, and I'm going to cut it into just like a cake. Just cut it like that and move it onto its own little pad there. These are mats, cheese mats, also sushi mats, bamboo mats. And so now you can see that beautiful texture has come out. That's a gorgeous, gorgeous batch. And I'm going to take some sea salt, some nice sea salt, and just put it in and just kind of gently rub it in. And I'm going to do both sides. So I'm going to let that just gently, it's a soft, still soft right now. And now I'm going to let it sit, depending on how I want it. If I want it to be sort of a soft and creamy feta, I won't leave it that long. But if I want it to be a hard, crumbly feta, I'll let it dry out. So I can just taste test it to know when it's at its right consistency. And that is the last stage of feta before turning it into some kind of delicious meal. Okay, so then this is the feta, that same batch of feta. And so then I cut it into cubes. And so then you can see that it's quite, it is quite firm now. So that's how I like to use it. And that firmness comes from just letting it sit a little bit longer. But I have it in a salt brine. Now, a salt brine this is a light salt brine, so it's a 1/4 cup of salt to 1 liter of water. And that salt brine is going to allow for a safe and really easy aging process. So a lot of people don't know that feta is an aged cheese. Well, it should be, but not long aged. So it can be, it can be between 2 and 8 months to age it. So if you're wanting to make some for your family and you just want a couple of jars in your fridge, you can make this batch, put it in the salt brine, and then simply leave it in your fridge to age. And it still tastes delicious even right now, but it just gets more and more delicious as as time goes on. Although, at the end of the 8-month time, it's not something that can last very long. So we're going to leave that aside. Okay. So, very quickly, I'm just going to show you a couple quickie little tricks. So I've rolled out my crackers, and now I'm just going to brush the cracker with some sunflower oil, and it's on oil. Sometimes just for making it faster and easier, if you lay it all out like this and brush it first, then you don't have to, sometimes I see people brushing those little individual crackers, and that's a long time. This is very quick. And then also what makes it quick is to take a pizza cutter and just use that to run through right on your cooking tray, as long as you have a tray that's good for that. And that is it for the crackers. We can then immediately put that into the oven, just like that. We don't even have to space them out. They'll just be, they'll shrink and kind of expand and create those little, those will be the little break joints where we'll be able to do that. So I'm going to just throw that into the oven. And while that's cooking, we are going to shift to another very easy cheese. I love this cheese because I call it the party cheese, ricotta. So now ricotta is one that you can use that you don't need a culture starter to. And there's kind of the traditional way, which comes after you make mozzarella. You make the ricotta from the whey of the mozzarella. But the way I'm going to show you right now is a whole milk method. And so, and it does make it much easier and quicker to do the whole milk method if you want to just make a lot, like if you have a lot of milk coming in, or if you like ricotta cheese and you just want to make it with store-bought milk, it's much cheaper to make that with the store-bought milk. So what I'm doing right now, if you've ever accidentally curdled milk with lemon juice, that is the principle that we are working on for this ricotta cheese. So the milk gets heated up to the point where it is almost boiling. So just where there's that little bit of a skim on the top of the milk. And then we're going to put the acidifier in. So the apple cider vinegar or the lemon juice. I prefer the apple cider vinegar, both because it has a little bit more neutral taste to it, but it also is much cheaper than lemon juice. So lemon juice is really nice if you're making something that you want to have a little bit of that lemon flavor in. Go up, by all means, go ahead. But the apple cider vinegar is just a very economical and you know, easy to have a lot of in your house, that you don't have to run out to the store. And plus, it's here. We unfortunately cannot grow lemons in our climate, but we can grow a lot of apple cider vinegar. If you ever have a crabapple tree, that can be another workshop, but you can make a lot of apple cider vinegar for very cheap with one apple tree or a neighbor's apple tree. If we could just have the intro to matzo. We've got a short little video that gives you the first couple steps. I started this batch of matzo this morning, and so now we'll see how I started it. Okay, so for the first step of our mozzarella cheese, we're going to have to acidify this. This is 12 liters of milk. We're going to make a big batch. So to acidify it, I'm just going to dilute some lemon juice in water, so that it doesn't curdle so immediately. And then I'm just going to slowly pour that in and giving it, I like to use this spoon with lots of holes in it. It stirs better. So we're just going to slowly pour that in. And then after that, we'll warm it up and we'll show you step 2. Okay, now we're on phase 2 of the mozzarella. So we've heated it up to just baby bottle temperature warm. And I'm going to put a full dose of rennet in. So that is, I'm doing 12 liters of milk in here. So I'm doing a teaspoon of rennet. And I'm just going to kind of pre-stir it a bit up and down. And then because it's a deep pot, I really want to stir that really up and down. So I want to make sure that I'm getting all of that, slowly pouring in a circle and stirring up and down. And now we're going to heat it up and get it to curdle. This is now what I've got. I've had that mozzarella straining for about an hour. So now it's still, you can see, maybe I hope it's still got sort of a jelly feel to it, but I'm going to bang it out because what I want to do is open it up so that more of the whey can come out. Now this is not going to be the same, so you can see right away it's kind of like falling apart, and I'm going to help it along by cutting it into strips. So those strips, maybe you can see, maybe you can't. When I'm cutting through these strips now, unlike the feta, the whey is just oozing out of it. So this is now what I'm trying to get at. I'm going to just see if I can just pick one up to show better, is sort of this kind of gooey slab of, and you can see the whey is just still dripping out of it. And in a moment, I will show you, if I can, that there's a lot of whey. There he is. You'll have to believe me. There's quite a bit of whey that is coming off these slabs of cheese. And so now those, I'm going to let them sit again for not very long. Okay. And we're going to do what is called the stretch test. So you know how mozzarella has that wonderful stringiness to it where it, you know, comes off your piece of pizza and leaves that nice stringy component, stringy feel to it. That is what we're going to do next with our mozza. And that's what's, this process that we're going to do right away is basically going to be melting the mozzarella cheese and forming it so that it stretches all together. So we're going to be using boiling water, and I'm just going to use this 4-cup measuring cup to do my test. So what I want to see is this, has this acidified enough to be stretchy? So right now it's continuing its process of acidifying, and that is what's going to make it stretchy. So I'm just putting some water on to boil, and I'm going to see, okay, perfect, actually. Okay, so now though, while my water's boiling, I just noticed that my pot of ricotta milk, so this is 4 liters of milk that's going to be the ricotta batch, it has come to an almost boil. So it's got that little bit of a skim of, you know, I'm going to try to pull it out. You know how you get that skin on the top of your milk? That's what I'm waiting for. So now I've got the hot milk, very hot milk, and I'm going to slowly pour some apple cider vinegar on it to curdle it. Now, this I would like you to be able to see too, but as it's going, I can see the curdling starting. It's a hot pot too, so I'm just going to move it over here so at least I can pick it up better. And you can see that, maybe you can't, maybe you can't. Nope. Well, you know what, I think it's just, as soon as it curdles, okay, there it's starting to curdle. You can see the curdle coming onto my spoon. And if any of you are wanting to make this one at home, this is a really nice one. So it's curdling just a little bit. I'm stirring it very gently. I don't want to break up those curds. I just want those curds, you know what, I can show it better with my other spoon. Hang on. Just take my larger, bigger slotted spoon because I'll be able to pick up more of those curds. Okay, there you can see them. So there it has started to curdle, though not fully. So I'm going to put a little more apple cider vinegar on it, and I'm going to send it back to heat it up a little bit more. And now here, my kettle is ready. So I'm putting boiling water in to do my little first stretch test Okay, now you can see it for sure. There's a lot of whey on there. In fact, I'll just pour it out just so you can see the pouring. Okay, so that much extra whey came just from that little 5 minutes of sitting there. So let's do our test and see if it's stretchy. So I'm going to start with just a little forkful, and I'm going to put that forkful into the boiling water and just let it sit for a moment. And when it comes out, we're going to see, oh, awesome. Okay, it's already almost stretchy enough. Can you see that? Okay, I'm gonna heat it up one more time. So it only stays stretchy for as long as it's heated. As soon as it stops being heated, okay, I'm gonna pull it apart. I'm gonna try to stretch it so you can see that it's got that nice. I'm gonna leave it for maybe about another 5 minutes or so, but not much, because what you want to do is you want to catch it at the right moment so that you can stretch the whole thing out. So I'm hoping to achieve that in my last few minutes of this workshop, and I think I will. So meanwhile, I'm going to pull this back. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, my ricotta is still taking a few minutes. So that is part of the thing of cheese making, is you can't control. You have to go with the flow and time yourself and time everything to work with the cheese's schedule. So I can show you one more thing before I'm going to go back to my ricotta and my feta, which is my huge pot of cheddar that I know is pretty much ready. Okay, so that is 12 liters of milk in here that had the same start as the feta. So getting it warm, having it warmed up, putting the starter culture in at 1:50 ratio, putting the rennet in according to whatever rennet you have. You have to use what is given to you as the right proportion, and letting it sit until it comes to that stage that we saw in the little feta workshop. And now it has been cut. Now, oh, it's just gorgeous. It's coming out in big handfuls of curd that you can see is just dripping with whey. But those curds are completely ready to go into my cheesecloth container over here. And I'm just going to continue to pull these out. So that's going to be, actually, I decided not to make a cheddar. So cheddar is in the same family as Lancaster cheese, Lancashire cheese, or an Italian cheese called caciocavallo, and a number of other cheeses that have that same start and the same aging process, but just come from a little bit different traditions. The thing about cheddar is it really works best to have a much larger volume. And so this amount, this 12 liters, I'm going to show you how much cheese that's going to make, makes essentially a small batch of cheddar. Normally, cheddar would be made in a huge, huge vat that would take maybe 100 liters. And that is how they would traditionally make it. Oh. Take that off. And so this is how I'm just making it, and I'm going to put that into a small cheese press, which I'm going to show you. That is the volume to make a cheese press, oopsie, of that size. So I'm going to, can't quite see that. So you see that little stainless steel cheese press, sort of a nice small one for home use, you know, for family style cheeses. I've used that one for a lot of different cheeses. And so I'm going to let this cheddar sit now because it needs to go through a whole next process where I'm going to be cutting it and flipping the slabs over every 15 minutes for about the next 2.5 hours. So this is the one I started at 8 a.m. and I assume that I'm going to be putting it into the mold at about maybe 5 or 6 o'clock tonight. So if you're going to make cheddar, you definitely need to have a full day and then the next day to salt it, and then it really has to be aged for at least 6 months. And of course we all know the cheeses that are 5-year-old or 7-year-old cheddar cheeses are of course the best. So what those are is then they need to be aged in more or less, you can do it in your fridge, but you have to really take care that it doesn't dry out. So you have to kind of like make a fake little cheese cave for in your fridge, which you can do. And you can also do other cheeses like that, like camembert, you can do in your fridge for the that aging process. And there's one that I love that I just pulled out. It's called a Cretin. Basically it's a French Chèvre cheese that you, I'm just going to cut into it because I'm so excited. It's almost like a camembert, but it has this beautiful interior. That's been aged about 2 months. And it has this gorgeous, gorgeous interior. And if you were here, it would be our shining glory to have this on our crackers as part of our little ending of our workshop. And speaking of which, yep, I'm going to pull those crackers out. So there we go. Our crackers are nicely done, and they're just separated into their little crackers. So if you were here, I would grab a little cracker and put a little piece of cheese on it and offer it to you like that. So once this is all over and done with, or at least we've gotten a handle on it enough that we can spend time together again, I will be so happy to have you visit me for this live workshop where I can share all these cheeses with you. So in the meanwhile, we're almost at our hour, as Aynsleigh is showing me my little time frame here. So we've covered a lot of cheeses, at least in that very, very preliminary way. We've got the recipes in the chat, and they're also all in our workshop because I need to stretch my mozzarella, and I need to make the next step with my ricotta. First of all, I'll just say goodbye to everyone who has joined me. Thank you very much.